they've had their loved one on hospice and they've passed away, the number one thing they tell me is that they wish they would have started hospice sooner. It's very rare. I don't think it's actually happened where someone would have said, no, 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 let's start hospice at the very, 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 very last second, last minute. And the reason why is because there's so much support and there's so much help for families. So in this Hospice Live, we're going to walk through a story, Laleh, and her experience with hospice and her family's experience. And we're going to walk you guys through so that you don't make that decision at the very, very last moment. If your loved one qualifies, you can make the choice to say, okay, let's start hospice. So enjoy. Let's walk with it together. All right. Welcome, guys, back to our Hospice Live, weekly Hospice Live. We have myself and also JT, our executive director here, walking through what hospice is. How's the day going for you, JT?
What's up, Charles? How's it going?
Oh, man, not too bad. World Cup is here.
I was going to say, you catch those matches yesterday.
Crazy penalty kicks. That was pretty wild. Back to back. Germany lost. And then who was it?
Netherlands. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's tough. That's tough. No, thanks for hopping on, guys, and joining us. We've been doing this for the last how many months now, JT?
Since the start of the year, so already halfway through the year as of today, June 30th.
That's crazy. Yeah, we've been over the last 23 years, we've been serving Dallas-Fort Worth with home health, hospice, and personal care services. And the question that always comes up is hospice is a very, very tough thing to talk about and sometimes confusing. So what we've been doing is hopping on these lives basically Tuesdays every week, if not every week, then every other week, and really going through a real story retold. So we've taken our patients that we've taken care of and just kind of reorganized for HIPAA purposes and really allowing families to kind of observe and see the story and walk through what is hospice and how that whole process works so that you get a good understanding. And so just like we talked about before, you don't wait to the very, very last minute if your loved one qualifies and if your family and everyone is on the same page to start. And JT, we've seen stories where families do say, wow, I really appreciate the help,
Yeah, no, your intro was exactly right. There's a lot of times that stigma, and we'll kind of walk through it and break it down throughout this live, but the stigma behind hospice is that it means there's only days to a week left for your loved one or for yourself. And so we're trying to debunk that myth quite a bit.
Yeah.
We've been focusing specifically this month on COPD as a terminal diagnosis and what that means when you do have COPD and hospice both enter at the same time. But we'll kind of get into the why that we're doing this. Obviously, we work with a hospice agency. We've been here in Plano over 20 years, but Charles always likes to pull up the stats. And so
the good old stats.
The stats here. And so the reason we talk about hospice on such a consistent basis and are trying to make it an easier conversation because I've heard before that someone has to hear that word hospice 7 times before they really can accept it, understand it, and move forward with it. And so if this is your first time or your 6th time hearing the word, thank you for joining us. About 2 million people in the U.S. receive hospice every year. I just saw another stat yesterday that's not on the board, but for the first time ever, over 50% of people that passed away over the age of 65 in the U.S. Were enrolled on hospice when they passed in 2024. So that's a good thing because this is a benefit that you pay into your whole life when you're paying into Medicare. And there's a pretty significant amount of money that's set aside for you for this stage of your life, for this season of your life. And so, like it says there, only 50% use it before they pass. It was 54% in 2024, I believe I read. So this is that first conversation when the doctor's office brings it up. This is where someone like Charles or myself or a liaison or a nurse.
Mhm.
There's several people that are equipped to have this conversation with families, and sometimes we like to call it a hospice 101.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I think it's like we talked about before, hearing the word hospice, like, it's just like, whoa, right? And so, but there's a lot of support, there's a lot of help for families, and so that's why we're trying to ease this conversation in so that you have a good understanding. You may not need it, your loved one may not need it right now, but at least you have a good familiarity of, say, okay, this is what hospice is. Oh, okay, this is step one. Oh, this is step two. This is step three. Okay, and so the hardest part is when families are right in it at the hospital and they're trying to make all these decisions, and your emotions are heightened and you're trying to figure out, it's very hard to digest it. And so this is like the perfect time to digest it, when nothing is happening or you're just needing to have information. So we like to talk about real stories retold, and so this week is Laleh Farzan, and so it's a story, her story, when it comes to her pathway, when it comes to home health, when it comes to hospice, and we're going to walk you guys through it, so that you have a good understanding of how she actually went through this whole process for home health and for hospice. So Laleh came to the United States in her early 20s. Her and her husband opened up a Persian tea house, and loved saffron tea, cardamom, and also some great pastries. The biggest thing about her is that she did this specifically when she opened up the Persian tea house to really bring people together, right? She raised two daughters for decades, and that tea house became like the place. Everyone would come, have tea in the evenings, coffee in the evenings, and really bring everyone together. In this story specifically, we're going to talk about COPD. This month is, it's already July, which is crazy. But we're talking about COPD and what it is, because she actually got diagnosed with COPD. So if you're not familiar with what COPD is, we want to make it very simple, very easy to understand. Think of it as inflammation or blockage in the lungs. So you're breathing in and out. If there's something that's blocking you from breathing, it makes it very difficult. And so the lungs, there's swelling, there's inflammation, there's occlusion, and so what happens is it's very hard to breathe. And so the reality of it is that it's actually the third leading cause of death worldwide, and 1 in 8 adults are affected, which is a lot. And so when you think about, let's say you go swimming and you've gone swimming, and you go down. My kids, we were just at Hawaiian Falls this last week. So that's like the first thing I think about was going down and then coming back up, and you get water, either you get aspirated or something comes in and goes in the wrong pipe. It's hard to breathe, right? Anxiety comes up. And so think about COPD, end stage COPD, families say that a lot, that their loved ones are constantly grasping for air, right? Because of the diagnosis. So it can be a very scary disease. Having that support is so needed. Having someone from home health or hospice, a clinical expert, really walk you through that is so essential. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and then that diagnosis, like Charles said, it leads to that shortness of breath or air hunger, and so little things start to be a little more exhausting. Some of our previous stories this month, we talked about trips to the mailbox,
mm,
short walks in the neighborhood, taking the dog outside. Here for her and her business, the little things like serving a table, carrying things, it takes away that some of that energy, and so some of these things are like work related. Some can be like daily living things like using the bathroom or showering yourself. And so that's where kind of these healthcare at home terms start to come in, like personal care or aid services or hospice, to assist with that stage of your life.
mm. So JC, I have a question. So let's say, she is getting winded, and then the doctor, like, she goes to see her PCP, and she went to go see her pulmonologist, and the doctor wrote home health orders. What does that look like for Laleh?
Yeah, no, great question. So home health is a great, I guess you could call it a first step,
Mm,
for getting treatment at home. And so there are some criteria. She has to have a skilled need, meaning she needs PT ordered, or she needs nursing to check on her O2 saturation, things like that warrant a clinician coming to the house. She also has to be homebound, otherwise she may have to just go to an outpatient PT clinic, or to her doctor's office. But if she is homebound and has that skill need and the doctor writes the order, such as here, um, they can come out underneath insurance. That's traditional Medicare or United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, whatever private insurance, and actually manage the medication list because maybe the pulmonologist and the PCP both ordered meds. And
Hmm.
now it's like you have all these bottles. You don't know which one is when. You can't really read the name on the bottles. And so the nurse can come out, organize it out, walk you through what exactly all of them are there for, and then also make recommendations on breathing equipment, supplies, a PT to help with some of that breathing. Charles has a PT background, so someone like that to come in and teach some of those breathing techniques. That way, even though the COPD isn't going to necessarily go away, managing those symptoms to make her feel safe at home.
Hmm.
And it's home health, we like to say, acts as like an extension of that doctor in your house. So rather than go see them on a weekly basis, they're basically sending out a clinical team to keep their eyes on you and help manage some of those
Yeah.
symptoms.
Yeah, it's so true because I think in Laleh's situation, but a lot of our patient situation, when they see home health order from the doctor, they're like, "Oh, yeah, an aide gonna come out and help me with like chores and cleaning and helping me with bathing and cooking." And I think that's the biggest thing that we see the disparity between that is when you're looking at home health, this is really clinically focused, right? So you've got the nursing, like JT you mentioned, therapy. But when you're looking at something outside of that, that's where that that pyramid. I'll see if I can pull that up real quick. Actually, you're looking at all of the pyramids of care at home, right? And so Laleh had is having at this moment the home health services, right? But let's say she needs another layer where insurance usually doesn't cover it unless she has a long-term care insurance plan where she could pull down X amount of funds and then pay someone to come and be there for several hours out of the day. And I think we've had so many questions about the gaps, right, in healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Personal care is like an added layer where, like Charles said, sometimes it can be covered by long-term care insurance, but oftentimes it is cash based and it's on an hourly basis. So if you look on Google or hear word of mouth about home care or personal care or aid services, these are trained caregivers, sometimes CNAs, certified nursing assistants, sometimes just a licensed caregiver. But they can come and help with bathing, grooming, meal prep, companionship, light housekeeping. So it's more than what home health can offer because it's not governed by insurance or by Medicare. And so as the disease kind of takes its course and progresses, that's where some of these other terms you might see. There's a lot of care on the
Mm,
pyramid here, but palliative care and hospice care are another layer on top of both home health and personal care.
yeah, no, it's and it kind of progresses, and we're in this situation specifically for Laleh is that she was on home health for a while, did great, was able to understand her new diagnosis of COPD with help of nurses, with help of the therapist, but unfortunately with her disease it actually got worse, and so that the stages of that disease got worse and she went to the hospital more frequently. And then the pulmonologist spoke with her and the family and said, oh, let's consider something about keeping her at home now because it's getting worse and treatments. There's not much more that we can do for Laleh. And I think that's the situation, and that's the hardest part I think about any family is when they hear those news and they're like, "Whoa, hospice!" The only thing I've heard of hospice was like on TV, right? Someone dying right away, and I would have never thought like we're gonna do this, we're gonna fight, and I think it's hard because when life takes its turn and the disease itself is progressing, you know, sometimes they feel like families feel like hospice we're giving up, and we're letting go, and I think that's where it's so important to at least understand what it is because maybe the pulmonologist didn't really walk you through what hospice was, or PCP didn't really paint the picture of what it was, and so that's kind of where we fall into place right now is what is hospice? JT, like what is hospice? What does that even mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a complicated question, but it can be, we like to think of it as like a pathway or uh, a journey for each patient. It looks different for everybody. Even someone with the same diagnosis, the same age,
Yeah.
the same symptoms, it can look a lot different because of family dynamics or end of life wishes or things that you might not think about until you have to.
Yeah.
And so hospice is now in that pyramid. This is now the top of it. And this is where we're focusing on pain, symptoms, emotional support, spiritual support, family support as well. And then, like I just said, honoring the patient's wishes. And so it can happen at home, which could be a house, it could be an apartment, it could be an assisted living or an independent living facility or a memory care facility. There's not just one place it happens, and it's appropriate. Same way with home health, a doctor has to order it, and typically the life expectancy of 6 months or less is the criteria. But like we've said, that it could be more than 6 months, it could be less. We definitely don't know,
Mhm.
what the H disease process looks like for everybody, but it's keeping your loved one or yourself safe at home, is the overall goal of hospice.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's hard. It's when you think of it, it's there's these three parts, right? And I think when we're talking about the pathways, like JT said, is okay, what is it? Now there's these three things that you really kind of, in a nutshell, wrap up what hospice is for you and for your loved one. So hospice is very different, like JT said, for each person, each family, each diagnosis. But these are the core things that Medicare and insurance created to support families if they do qualify. And so the care team, which is the people, the team, the clinicians, you got supplies and DME. So DME is durable medical equipment. So that's like wheelchairs, walkers, hospital supplies, hospital bed, oxygen. And then you have medications. So now you have the medications that are provided by the hospice, and maybe your patient has, or your loved one has, other medications that they use. Now the hospice kind of coordinates all of that, so it's a great benefit and support for families when we talk about these three areas. So let's dive into these three. I'll start with the hospice team. JT, if you want to tackle the DME and supplies, and then we'll circle back and go through medication. So when you think about your hospice team, right? So let's say Laleh actually qualifies for hospice based off of the pulmonologist writing that order. Um, Now, in order for someone to qualify for hospice, right, there has to be all of these measures clinically that are met. So for Laleh, hers is COPD, right? So the hospice will kind of review everything, diagnosis, everything, and make sure that your loved one qualifies. And if they do, then they'll send a nurse out. Your nurse, your RN, is the quarterback. Think of the main person who is in charge of coordinating everything, creating a really good care plan, getting to know Laleh, getting to know her tea shop that she had, and her daughters, and what she likes, what she doesn't like, food aversions, right? Just ran everything that you can think of, because every patient is different. And the goal of hospice is to tailor the care towards Laleh and her family. So the nurse will go out, do a head to toe assessment. And then the other team members that are involved in that are the hospice aide, the chaplain, social worker, and the medical director. And there's a few other people, but if you think about the core people, these are the core individuals that are part of Laleh's plan. And so the nurse will go out and say, okay, great. Laleh is probably wanting a bath every so often. They have help at home, but having extra support, then she could say, all right, let me get a hospice aide out there to come out once or twice a week. A hospice aide is not going to be doing cleaning the ceilings or removing popcorn from your ceilings and doing, construction in your house, right? The aide is specifically under the guidance of that quarterback, that RN, to say, okay, because they're licensed. So they're a CNA, a certified nurse assistant. And their job is to say, okay, great. The nurse says, all right, on Mondays and Tuesdays, or Mondays and Wednesdays, you're going to do a bed bath, and you're going to change linens on her bed. There's certain things. And then that aide has to do that. If there's any changes to that aide care plan, then the nurse is the one who has to change that. And so it's beautiful because there's support, right? And so there's a relief for Laleh to know, okay, she can get a really nice bath once or twice a week, right? Or more than that, depending on what she wants and what the family needs. Another portion which we talked about recently is a chaplain, right? So you think about a chaplain, a lot of times it's like, oh, like, a chaplain is going to talk about God and religion. And so the chaplain's job is to be really neutral, is to be there and support you emotionally through the stages of grief. Because now Laleh is not doing what she used to do. She's not cooking. She's not running her shop. Right? That's grief. It's a lot of things to reflect on. And so that chaplain is there to support and process all these things along with the social worker. Her job, or her, or he or she, right? Their job is to guide through end of life wishes, right? Is there a living will in place? Is there plans for the funeral? Because a lot of those things can become really hard to talk about, especially when you're in it. But having support to say, okay, this is what it looks like. Step one, step two, just having that support is so pivotal. Now you have the hospice medical director who oversees, right? Medicare created these systems so that the director, the doctor, can oversee it clinically, everything. And so now you may have Laleh may have her PCP and her pulmonologist. A lot of times, because of the COPD that she has and the terminal diagnosis and the fact that it's progressing really fast, a lot of the doctors will defer that to the hospice doctor, so that way the coordination can be quick. Let's say hospice nurse comes out, sees Laleh, and there's a change in her status. She needs to change specific medications to alleviate her shortness of breath or pain. Boom, she could pick up the phone, call the hospice doctor, coordinate those meds, and effectively get those out timely, instead of calling the PCP, which may take a day or two, right? And that's why hospice made these constructs to kind of help for quicker coordination of care. And all of these team members together are there to help support. Yeah.
Yeah, and a question we get, and I'll give it to you, Charles,
Mhm.
is everyone on this team available 24/7 in the mornings and the afternoons? When can they reach all of these people?
Yeah, and so what happens is that it's a great question. Is each hospice, they have their run a little bit differently, but per Medicare, 9 to 5 is office hours, right? So this team is available to you, and then most of the best hospices, what they do is they have a nurse available 24/7. So let's say from 5 o'clock to the next morning, there's an on-call nurse who has an understanding of what's going on with your loved one, right? So that you can answer those questions, and it's a beautiful thing to have. But usually, this team is available 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. The weekends, after hours, is the on-call team. The nurse that's available 24/7. That's the nurse. So,
Yeah, and I'll just touch on that just to kind of wrap up before we talk about the what that comes with hospice as well, is
mhm.
specifically for COPD, that shortness of breath, that air hunger, some of those symptoms flare up when you don't want them to. 1 in the
Mm,
morning, 2 in the morning. And what a family like Laleh's might be used to is shortness of breath comes, they have whatever the physical therapist might have recommended for breathing treatment, but that's not cutting it to make her feel safe. Now they call 911, and the fire department comes out, ambulance comes out, they go to the hospital, go to the ER, get some of that same treatment that they may get on hospice
yeah.
at the ER, and then they discharge home back to home health care. And that cycle, although you feel safe that night
Mhm.
being in the hands of someone like the ER, something like hospice is a great resource for families because they have a nurse on call 24/7.
Yeah.
And if over the phone's not going to do it, then that nurse can come out and see you at the bedside, and kind of give you that peace of mind. So we see that a lot, that cycle of back and forth to the hospital, kind of being alleviated by the benefit of hospice,
Yeah.
keeping them at home.
Yeah. hundred
So,
percent. hundred
and
percent.
some of those things that keep you safe at home are durable medical equipment. So a lot of things you see in the hospital, it's covered under Medicare Part A, which is the same as a hospital stay or a rehab stay. And so gloves, wipes, incontinence care like Chucks and Depends, wheelchair, walker, hospital bed, like Charles said earlier. All of these things are covered by your hospice agency. Um, Sometimes it's not the DME you might see on TV in the commercials. Like, we don't have, the hospital bed that can stand you up and roll around on itself. And
AI walkers now, and it's just
that's, but your hospice will make all these available to you 24/7. And then, as we were talking about earlier, medications as well. So there's different medications that come with every diagnosis, some for your skin, some for your pain, some for different symptoms that you're feeling during this season. That's where the benefit of hospice is those changes, those prescriptions can be done, ASAP and not overnight to your grocery store or your pharmacy, wherever you get your medications. It's delivered directly to your house. And so ultimately, hospice is there to make you feel safer at home and have all the things you need and be prepared for those symptom flare ups.
Yeah. So JT, now that like Laleh and the family, they know what hospice is. Like, what are the stages? Like, can you walk us through like these like simple steps to like actually get care
For
started?
sure, for sure. So if you're watching this and you're thinking like, okay, that sounds like my mom or my dad. I've seen those symptoms. We've tried home health. We've been to the ER several
Mm,
times. That's step one. That's just the fact that if you're watching this and you can think of someone, that's that recognition. The second step is, like we said earlier, doctor's order. So that's the PCP, pulmonologist, cardiologist, anyone that's been responsible for their care. Writes that order and asks the hospice to go out, evaluate, and initiate hospice at that point. Um, when the doctor does that, they may have a hospice that they either are medical director of, or they've just trusted over the years. They've built good relationships with their administrator or their nurses. But at the end of the day, you always have a choice. That's your patient choice as a patient or as a representative of them. So do your research. We always encourage patients to go on Google, read the reviews, look at their website, see where the company is from, who owns it. Um, Same types of things that you would do for hotel stays and restaurants. These are big decisions, so you don't want to necessarily just go with what's easiest. But from there, that's when everything kind of comes in and meets you where you are and meets your family where you are. And so, um, if it is time or you think it's time, reach out to that doctor, ask them what they think. And sometimes they're not as versed. We hear from doctors that
yeah.
they go to school to save lives, and so hospice can sometimes be kind of taboo for them too. So even reach out to a hospice you see online, give them a call directly or book an appointment with them, because they can maybe reach out to your doctor for you at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I think the another question that we always get too is the qualifications. Like, how do I know if my loved one's going to qualify for hospice? And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. We're talking about COPD and the diagnosis of COPD. There's qualifications underneath that clinically. Then you have other diagnoses, right? You've got cardiovascular has so many different diagnoses. You have the lungs, you have the brain, the little cartoon over there. You have Alzheimer's and dementia. You've got blood cancers. You've got so many things. You've got debility as a whole, there's a term called failure to thrive. That may be a term that's used that people may have heard. And so what does that even mean? And so there's all of these things that qualify clinically, but all those things have to be met in order for Medicare to cover these services that we just talked about. And so a lot of times you may have a loved one that's on hospice for 6 months, 10 months, a year, 2 years. How are they still qualifying, right, for hospice services? And so what happens is the hospice team will recertify and see if those clinical criteria are still meeting for Medicare to cover these services. And I think that's the biggest thing and the hardest thing for some families to understand is that you're on hospice and actually my mom, dad got better. What does that mean? Like why are they discharging? And so, reach out to your hospice if you're in that situation. Reach out, help them, ask them to help educate you more so that you can understand, what it means to then be discharged off of hospice, right? Or to continue to qualify. Or the doctor wrote an order for hospice and the nurse came out and said, mom doesn't qualify, right? What does that even mean, right? And so, take time to understand that because it's important because these are Medicare funds that are given to families. And so, speaking of Medicare, who pays for this, JT? Like, who pays for
Yeah.
all these things?
Yeah, good question. I'd like to joke with Charles that, the Medicare is something that you pay into your whole life. So this is something that you have the right to and that you've paid into. But when it does come time for hospice, it is 100% covered by Medicare Part A. And so you don't have to deal with any copays or deductibles, things like that. Um, Medicare has built this benefit for families to have, in one of the most important times of your entire life. So,
Yeah. Yeah. What about if someone's younger than 65? Like how does that work?
yeah, that's a great question. And, sometimes we do see patients that are under the age of 65 that qualify for hospice care. And so, if they have a commercial insurance plan, they haven't had Medicare yet for any reason, um, I would reach out to your insurance provider if I was in their shoes or in their family's shoes and ask them, do I have a hospice benefit? If so, what are some hospice agencies that are in network with me? Because they may or may not be able to take that insurance. And then sometimes we've seen patients over the years, they may need to pay privately for hospice
Yeah.
because of the condition they're in. So that's a great question. And I would, of course, always reach out to your insurance rep directly
Hmm.
to get some more information there.
Yeah. So now we fast forward and Laleh is on hospice. She's qualified for hospice services. She's at home. She's got her DME, her oxygen hospital bed. She's got support. She's got a clinical team around her, a nurse that can come out a few times a week and aid. And she's still, enjoying her life to some extent, but under the confines of that support under hospice services. And so, that takes the burden off of the family. It doesn't, I think we talk about this a lot, JT. Hospice and the team doesn't take away the fact that this terminal diagnosis is difficult, right? It doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't relieve it. It's not there to be there and solve all of problems that are faced. It is support. It is clinical guidance and clinical support, so that you have at least some understanding. We talk about the airplane analogy, going through turbulence. And when you go through turbulence, knowing that the pilot is there to say, okay, hey, we're going to go through this, buckle up. It's going to be a little rocky. We'll go through this together. And then afterwards, it'll calm down. And that's where hospice is there to really guide families through it as a whole. And we talked about this at the end. These are the pillars that Laleh went through when it comes to her COPD diagnosis: home health, then getting that extra care through personal care services, and then palliative care, continuing to seek aggressive treatment, but then also get some care coordination through a palliative care program. And then at the end, when all the things that she's done, she's exhausted everything and done everything that she could, the disease continued to take its toll, and the doctor recommended hospice services. So that is what the continuum of care at home looks like. It's support, and in knowing that, then you can ask the right questions when that time does come for your loved one. But yeah,
We did get a question. Thanks for joining us on all the platforms today, y'all. But on TikTok, Tyler the fire medic, he said, "I need hospice to better explain how it works to the families. Explain to them this is hospice, and you don't have to call 911 for things that you do for someone not on hospice. Explain what they need to do when something's going on, who to call, and not to call 911. I have no issues helping someone, but there's no need to transport a patient for altered mental status. Please explain it to families."
yeah, that's so. Whew. Thank you, sir, for all you do, because firefighters, I mean, and senior care and hospice care, they do so much. And I think that's the difficult part when it comes to hospice and ER visits and calling 911. It's all about education. It's all about knowing what hospice is. And in those situations, what we see a lot is that the family may not know or have a good plan based off of what the hospice has done for them. So let's say in that situation, let's tie back to saying that the nurse comes out, does the admission, and based off of the diagnosis of COPD, creates a plan saying, okay, when this happens, do this. When this happens, do this. When this happens, which is the worst case, do this, and we'll come out. Now, if the family is not all on the same page and they don't fully understand that plan, emotions happen and they'll freak out, because the first thing you know is to call 911, right? And when you call 911, you're on hospice. So he's going to say, I'm not supposed to really be here. You're on hospice. I can take you, but you have to revoke or stop hospice for you to go back to the hospital, right? And so that frustration that he has, man, I can't believe he probably has a lot of that, right? And so the reality of it is that families, once they do start hospice, they have to understand, but also really be an advocate for your loved one, and say, okay, what's the plan? What is the plan that now that I'm on hospice, what do I need to know? What are the pathways? What are the things that I need to expect when Laleh is like this, when she's having trouble breathing? And what medications do I need to use or guide me through so I know exactly what to do? Right. And then if you have that plan, if you have that, it mitigates a lot of those calls to 911. It mitigates the firefighter coming out and going to the hospital. And so education is so pivotal, and understanding the benefit of hospice is so pivotal. So yeah. Hey, JT, what else do you think on that
Yeah,
one?
no, you covered all of it. I know we've had patients over the years where that plan of care that you have set, you like almost go back to muscle memory of like when
Yeah.
things go bad, you call 911. But if the family can has that conversation early, we talked at the very beginning about how many times you have to hear the word.
Yeah.
We've had patients even just last week who they'll tell me when I educate the daughter or the son of the patient, it's like, hey, we everything sounds great. We want to do this, but that word,
Mm,
can you make sure your team doesn't use that word in front of our family member? And
mm,
we've done that over the years. We'll call it comfort care or even
yeah.
palliative care, even though it's something a little different.
Hmm.
But sometimes that alone gives them some peace of mind. But having those conversations earlier with your loved one or
Yeah.
with whoever it might be can
Yeah.
make the scariest times like the middle of the night calling 911 a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question that he had. We hear it a lot. So also thank you for your service and all you do as a firefighter. Appreciate you. So, but yeah, I think that's all we got for today. Thanks for hopping on, you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us and walking through um, hospice and what hospice is and learning more. Feel free, follow our channel, like and subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, hospice.charlene.org, or text that number as well, 972-778-8038. We're here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and it is hot. So it's summertime right now, so we are hydrating everybody. So, but yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you guys soon again. Yeah, JT, anything
yeah,
else?
yeah, we'll be at Darren and Paige on YouTube. Hi, we did see your chat in here, so thank you for hopping on. And next month we'll focus. It's 4th of July. It's the summertime, so we're going to focus on some falls, functional decline, some of those diagnoses that we see more of in the summertime. So come back and join us for that. But in the meantime, reach out to us anytime. We're here.
Cool. Awesome. Well, God bless you guys. See you guys soon.